Hello and welcome to the March USDA pre-report webinar. My name is Peter Kemp and I'm an attorney with Progressive Ag Law. Joining me today is Ray Grabansky, who's also an attorney with and the president of Progressive Ag Law and the president and lead market analyst with Progressive Ag Marketing. Ray, we're here to talk about the March report. What do you see in that report and what do you think farmers should do in response to that report?
Well, this is not a very important report. Typically, February and March are both the ho-hummers of the year. So we really don't find anything new on the northern hemisphere because it's winter after all. I mean, it's a nice day out today. We don't have any snow, and we may be planting in 2 or 3 weeks, we hope, but chances are we're going to get a few more snowstorms, and we're going to be buried in 2 feet of snow anyway. So there's not much happening in North America. South America, though, we might see some revisions in the Brazilian corn and soybean production and in Argentina. Both of those countries have had very good weather the last couple of weeks, and it's a bit wet right now in Brazil, a little bit on the drier side in Argentina, but there's no shortage of stored soil moisture. So the crop is going to finish in very good condition. It's either going to be a record crop or near a record large crop yield-wise. And the market already knows it for the most part. So I think they're going to raise production of one or the other, or both countries, both corn and soybeans, some. And they usually do it incrementally, month by month. So I think they raised it a bit last month. They'll probably raise it a bit this month, and they'll probably do it in a couple of more, maybe the April and May report as well, before we get the actual final yield. So I'm thinking they might raise both, just a small percentage, until we actually harvest it. And if the harvest is good, if it doesn't rain a lot during harvest, then it'll all come off in good shape. And it does rain a lot there. It is a rainforest, so you can have harvest delays too.
So the next big report then will be March 28th, and that's going to be a bit more influential than this one.
Yes, that is really the blockbuster of the spring, because that's where the government puts their estimates of prospective plantings of corn, wheat, soybeans, and pretty much every other crop. So it's a very, very important report, and the market will react to it. Actually, that's where we start to focus, away from old crop and over to the new crop year. And that's the good news, because we have big supplies, big stocks. We bottomed the market, in my opinion. And the most positive thing that can happen to this market is time goes by, because we'll focus on the new crop year, and then all bets are off. Anything can happen. I think I've said before, hope springs eternal, in us farmers and agriculturalists' mind, because anything can happen in the new crop year. We could have a 2012 and have a terrible crop failure, which is good for us because prices go way up and all our bins are full and we're happy.
So the advice in the next 30 days is just to wait until what happens in the March report, and then we'll start seeing hopefully a little bit of movement in the market.
Yes, or you could say buy. We've been saying that for a couple of months now, actually. We bought back half of our hedges we had in place on the November report. I think it was November 12th. We bought the other half back sometime in late January 25th, and they were both at about the same price. We didn't move for 2 months. I think it was $3.58 or something like that in March corn. That's been the low of the year. We're only a nickel or a dime from it, and we probably won't do much for the next 3 months either. But if you need to buy commodities to feed hogs or livestock, buy it now. If you've previously sold stuff and you still have hedges on from previous years like we did, buy it all back. And if you're a speculator, sell some puts just on the side, because I don't think it's going to go down anymore. I think you'll collect the premium and add a little Vegas money, like some guys say.
Well, thanks for that good information on that report. Even though it's a ho-hum report, you still have to react and market in light of that. Now we're going to turn to another issue that's facing a lot of farmers in North Dakota. It's the ARC payments. So back in 2015, 2015, in last summer, a lot of farmers were making a choice about which farm program they wanted to be administered under the 2014 Farm Bill. And I know many farmers in North Dakota chose to be administered under the ARC program that's administered with county-wide averages. And we've been contacted by a number of farmers throughout North Dakota to investigate apparent discrepancies amidst counties that have very similar agriculture conditions but receive vastly different payments under the ARC County program. And we've been doing some investigating and meeting with farmers about these issues. And Ray, do you want to talk a little bit about what we've uncovered in that investigation and some facts on the ground?
Yes. A little more background information too. The Farm Bill actually gave us a choice between one type of coverage, which is the PLC, which is based on price only. There is no controversy here if you chose PLC, because that is essentially price only. And everybody knows what the price is. There's no dispute about that. National Ag Statistics Service are the best at statistics in the world, and they've said that essentially, well, we used to have price insurance for 25 years. What's new here is this ARCO, average revenue by county. So what they do, they calculate a base based on the 5-year high, the 5-year average, throwing out the high and the low. So it's an Olympic average. So that's 2000, isn't it 9, 10, 11, 12, 13? And then they use that as the base. So they were supposed to use NAS data, but there's a procedure that was written up in a 5-page deal I wasn't aware of until just a month ago. But they allow them, if they don't have NAS data, to use, well, I think the 5-page letter says, then they can use RMA data, which we always thought was crop insurance. It's really some pie in the sky data. Doesn't have much tie at all to crop insurance, we're finding out. And then, or they can use, whatever the county directors, essentially they can use just about whatever they want. If you read the whole thing, and it's a lot of legalese in there, but okay, so for the first point I want to make is if you signed up for PLC, which a lot of farmers did in sunflowers and canola, and in North Dakota, even some wheat growers, maybe 20 or 30% of the wheat growers. I think down in the southern plains, even 40 or 50%, because some of the professors down in that area were pushing it. But no claim there. We have no beef with the way that's administered, because it's done very well. They've done it for years. But this new thing, this ARC County, it's a great program. The corn growers introduced it a few years ago under, I think it was called Acre then, and this is a great program. It gave farmers a choice, and almost all corn and soybean guys picked it. In fact, in our area, you made a mistake if you picked anything else. So 99% maybe are of corn and soybean guys, and maybe 60% of the wheat guys are in this program. Maybe only 1% of the sunflower guys are, because PLC was so much more favorable when we ran those numbers. But anyway, it doesn't affect everyone, just mainly wheat and corn guys. And the issue was they started with supposedly NAS yields, but then, for example, in Lemoore County, North Dakota, for 33 years, NAS reported a yield for corn in Lemoore County. NAS, in my opinion, there's nobody better, in the world at coming up with yield estimates than NAS. We use them all the time in the marketplace. Every government report, September, October, November, January, those are all NAS data, and they're very good at what they do. But that NAS data was the base, and then they were supposed to use NAS data on harvest. But somehow we got some crazy idea, somebody did anyway, that we need to do a special survey, and they need to get 25% of the acreage back in these surveys, and they need 7% response of the farmers. So for example, in Lemoore County, they got 27 farmers that returned it. They needed 30. They didn't get it. So instead of using a NAS yield, which I've heard is somewhere around 150, they assigned a yield of 165. They call it an RMA yield. It has nothing to do with crop insurance records. Some people think the RMA yields are accurate. They're terrible. Trust me, they're terrible. We even had confirmation this week, Because in Logan County, the other county in North Dakota that got paid nothing, we had an insurance company that has essentially, almost a 50% share of the business in that county. And they calculated their 50% of the acres, or a little bit less than 50%, what the yield was on all the corn they insured. So they had total acres, total production, and the yield. It was just under 90 bushel. And I took a lot of statistics in college, but one thing I did learn, when you get a good statistical sample of 40% of a population, and it's more than 40 or 50 observations, that becomes almost a fact, almost a very reliable number. If you get up to 100 or 200 observations, it's absolutely rock solid. So if we had 45% of the acres in that survey and the yield was 90 in Logan County, it's 90. It's not 109, and that's way off. That's 18% too high. That's a terrible number. My 12-year-old son could come up with a better guess than that by throwing a dart at a board. I mean, it's not good. So to call that an RMA yield, it's actually more like a pie in the sky yield. It's not even close, not close. And all we're asking, we're all human beings. We all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes once in a while. So we invented some crazy survey. It didn't work out. We got bad numbers. We assigned him even worse numbers with RMA. Let's just fix it, And maybe a good solution is to get the yields from the crop insurance buy-up. The guys who buy up crop insurance, not the guys that buy CAT, because they never get audited, and it's never auditable, and so therefore that data is bad. I think it's all bad. But if you get somebody who buys up insurance, 50% or more, the insurance companies, there's 3 insurance companies that probably have half the business. If we get the data from those 3 in every county, we would have rock solid numbers. Pay it off that. They've got it anyway, RMA's got it. But why are they saying we give sign an RMA yield? They should recall it a pie in the sky yield, because that's what it is. That is not a crop insurance based yield. And anybody who says that is just foolish.
So one of the big issue that we're seeing as we're researching this is that there's a mix of RMA derived numbers and NAS derived numbers in the base, and then you don't know if the program year, if that's going to be an RMA or NAS yield, and that to us appears like you're comparing apples and oranges. And we would like to see apples be compared to apples and oranges be compared to oranges as a more fair and equitable system. And we've, you want to talk a little bit now about what we're going to be doing and kind of what remedies we're going to go about pursuing?
Yeah, I can do that. And but before we do, we're using the term RMA yield, which USDA and the FSA has used. We really should reterm that, because that's not really that's a pie in the sky yield. So this is even worse. So you're starting with apples, and then maybe there's even a few pie in the sky yields in there that are not even close. And then you go to a harvest yield and you use a pie in the sky there consistently. Like 70%, 50, 60, 70% of the counties in states west of the Mississippi, 70% in some of those states west of the Mississippi had the pie in the sky yields used for their harvest yield. And that's an absolute atrocity. East of the Mississippi River, not nearly, maybe only 2 to 5% of the counties had the pie in the sky yield established to it. So that's a lot different problem east of the Mississippi and west. So your question now, remind me what that was again. No, I forgot.
It was, do you want to talk a little bit about how we're going about pursuing correcting these low payments, no payments in counties like Logan and Lemoore and other counties throughout?
Well, really, we've got two steps that we're using. The 2 steps are, first, we're basically asking farmers, mass numbers of farmers, to sign up where we could represent them on a lobbying and, what are we calling it, a lobbying and
legislative action.
Lobbying and asking, if we can't get the Obama and Ag Secretary Vilsack to change this administratively, and they have political pressures that, maybe they have some environmental groups that don't want to pay farmers anything. So, I mean, they have pressures to deal with too. But if we can get them to change it, great. Then, nothing more has to be done. And if we can't, by getting these farmers to sign up with us, now we've established an attorney-client relationship, which establishes confidentiality, which means we can get their data from their yields, and we can prove what those yields should have been, and therefore, like we did in Logan County, we can establish a yield that they should have been paid off of, and then we know what the claim is, and we go on from there. But if we can't get it changed administratively, get it changed by the legislators. If we can't get that changed, the last ditch effort is, we would like to avoid it if we can, but sometimes you have to go into litigation, and if we can't get it resolved any other way, we actually don't have an agreement to represent the mass number of farmers that way, but some farmers are so upset about this, they want to go right to litigation. They don't want to wait, it'll take too long, and there's a process that it has to go through, an administrative process. And maybe, Peter, maybe you want to brief us on that. You probably have a little, you're the University of Minnesota graduate, and he reminds me that's the number 20 law school in the country, and I'm a University of North Dakota graduate, which is number 78. So he might be more technically correct.
As Ray was saying, we're doing this on two fronts. The first one is an administrative lobbying contract. That one we're doing pro bono for free. And we are lobbying on behalf of farmers, and the reason we want to establish an attorney-client relationship is so that we can have data and it can be protected by the attorney-client confidentiality. The second front, as Ray was mentioning, is that a number of farmers have already volunteered and asked us to bring a lawsuit. So on behalf of those farmers, we're considering bringing a lawsuit. And the first step in any lawsuit where you're pursuing an administration, like the United States Department of Agriculture, you have to take administrative actions to appeal the decisions. Then if the administrative actions go favorably, we will leave it at that. But if the administrative actions do not go favorably for the farmers, we will pursue an action in court. Those farmers have already volunteered. We're not asking additional farmers to join us in that lawsuit, but we are asking additional farmers to join us in the lobbying effort, because when you're lobbying, it is a numbers game. And the more people that you can stand behind you as you're presenting your petition to the agency, the more power and the more influence you have. So if you're interested in participating in the lobbying effort, you can go to fixthefarmsubsidy.com, which is a website we've established with our partners in the Syngenta litigation, and you can find out more information about our lobbying effort, and there you will find phone numbers to contact us to ask about our pro bono lobbying contract. Speaking of the Syngenta litigation, we are pursuing this administrative actions in the ARTCO matter. We're pursuing that with the attorneys that we're pursuing the Syngenta matter with.
Yes. We fortunately convinced them that this ARTCO thing came up, and we thought, there was an Ag Week article that said in November, I think it was a $15 million mistake, so to speak. It costs farmers in 8 counties in North Dakota. But we've researched this. It is not limited to that. It might be, by the time we overturn every rock and every pebble, to find out what's underneath it, it might be maybe it's not 15, maybe it's 30 million, twice as much in corn in North Dakota alone, because of that mix of apples and oranges and mixed up on both sides. And this RMA yield we've discovered is a pie in the sky yield. It's actually not anything based on insurance at all. So that might be bigger. We had 7 counties in North Dakota that got paid a wheat payment. We were supposed to be paid on all wheat yields. We were actually paid on spring wheat yields. Those counties that have a lot of durum, for example, let's say you're 50% durum in the county, your durum yield was 36, your spring wheat yield was 40, you should have been paid on all wheat at 38, you were paid on 40, you might have lost 5% of your payment. And so we might have a $5, $10, $15, $20 million mistake in 2014 on wheat in North Dakota. And we might actually, in 2015, those payments go up considerably because wheat prices were down. So for the 2015 year, we might have a $50 million problem in wheat alone in North Dakota. This is a 5-year farm bill. So we have multiple years this. If we don't correct this, we've got problems for years. And actually, I've looked at some other states. I think we've looked at 14 or 15 states, haven't we? On both corn and wheat. And trust me, west of the Mississippi, particularly Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, those states, it looks to us like 50 to 70% of the counties were assigned this pie in the sky or RMA yield. And man, it could be $50 million in corn and $50 million in wheat for all 3 of those states. That's 150. You know, we paid $4.5 billion in our co-payments so far. And we know that, you know, maybe it's 10% short, maybe it's 5%. If it's 5% short, that's $200 million. If it's 10% short, that's $400 million. If it's 20% short, our farmers were shorted $800 million. That is not a little deal anymore. And these Syngenta lawyers that we're working with in Texas, they're very, very good lawyers. They're very impressive. They've been litigating big cases, you know, mass tort cases in many examples. Martin Phipps settled a $750 million lawsuit on rice, on that GMO rice. These guys are experienced, battle-tested lawyers. And fortunately, we brought this ARCO issue and we said, hey, this is, you know, maybe it's not a $6 billion issue like Syngenta maybe is, give or take a few billion, but it's maybe a $400 million issue, give or take $100 million or two here and there. You know, we don't even know. But $400 million is only 1/115th as the size of $6 billion. You know, you have to think that in perspective. So we fortunately talked them into doing this. Let's just do this pro bono. It's only $400 million. You know, and you know, with the idea we would like to sign Syngenta contracts, but this shouldn't be a complicated thing. It was screwed up. You know, we should be able to administratively fix it. We've got really top-notch lawyers working on it, and they are smart. They have a plan. They talk to the right people. I think USDA, for example, was at the Commodity Classic over the weekend in New Orleans, and I know some of our attorneys were talking with some of the USDA FSA people about what we needed to do in appeals, how we could speed this along, and maybe how we can just fix it administratively. So, you know, it's not so simple for FSA. They have to figure out, okay, it's bad. They know that it's bad. You know, it didn't work out. It's not do it. But how are we going to fix it? You know, and where do we get the money? Because they still owe us, you know, 10, 20% of this payment. Let me make another point, Peter. You know, we all pay our taxes and file with the IRS every year. You know, that's coming up. For farmers, it's March 1st. It's actually been over. Yeah. For the rest of us, it's April 15th. So if we file our taxes with the IRS and we only pay 90%, let's say we owe $20,000 and we only pay them $18,000. You know, the IRS isn't going to say, oh yeah, that's good enough. That's good enough. Just pay us 90%. The IRS is going to come after you, and you are going to pay that $2,000 with penalties and interest. I know you will. But you know, why should farmers take 90% of what they were entitled to? And some farmers get zero. So they're not happy about that. And you know, we have a right to ask for. We're not asking for the sequestering 7.5% or whatever they subtracted out of there, because Congress put that in place. So that would be a frivolous claim. And, you know, Peter, as lawyers, we can't pursue a frivolous claim. Nope. We could not go after that 7.5% because that's legislated. And farmers aren't, you know, we're willing to pay our share to balance the budget. But this program was put in place to compensate farmers when their incomes drop hard. And they dropped hard.
That they did.
And to only pay, you know, 80 or 90% and say, oh, that should be good enough. You should be happy you got that. Well, and some farmers got nothing. Well, they're not very happy.
No.
And you can understand that, can't you?
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I know. If you only paid me 80% of what you're entitled to, I'd be pretty happy too.
Yeah, you'd have a wage claim at the North Dakota Department of Wages. So, yes.
Yeah, there has been some news in the Syngenta lawsuit. Really just two big news items that we've been asked about recently. The first one is that a company called ChemChina, which is a Chinese chemical company, offered to buy out Syngenta. And a number of farmers have asked us, what does this do to the question of liability in the Syngenta lawsuit? And the answer is, it doesn't change anything with regard to the question of liability. When you purchase a corporation subject to its existing liabilities. And so if ChemChina goes through with this purchase, they will be forced to pay out what Syngenta owes. Perhaps there's been some discussion that the offer to purchase may speed up negotiations. Of course, we can't guarantee that. We don't know that. But that has been something that has been talked about in this case.
It'd sure be nice to be able to settle this all up in a year or two. Instead of, we were talking 2 to 5 years. But generally, let's get away from this, this specific case, but, let's say a medical malpractice or a medical issue happens with some product and they get acquired by another company. The acquiring company, if I were buying another company, let's say your company, if I were buying your company, Peter, and you had a hit and run accident or something that, somebody was suing you over this and you had some liability, maybe your driver wasn't doing the right thing. So, I'd probably want that claim settled so that, if you had $1 million worth of assets and you had $200,000 taken away, I would know, I'm essentially buying $800,000 in assets. But if it could be $2 million and it could be, zero, I kind of like to know before I bought it what exactly I was buying. And you can imagine that may be the impact, but ChemChina and Syngenta haven't really given us a copy of their contract yet, have they? So, and we aren't going to know for sure. We're just speculating.
But the biggest thing to bear in mind is that this doesn't change the question of liability. The other more interesting development and kind of unique development in this case is that about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, a judge in Kansas City ordered the plaintiffs and defendants to confer about appointing a special master to oversee settlement negotiations. And this is more unique to happen this early on in the proceedings, but we're optimistic that this is a good sign for our case. And we will be continuing to pursue litigation up until the time where a settlement offer that is reasonable for our clients is made. So those are the two big updates in the Syngenta case. We do want to share with you a little bit about our litigating partners at Phipps Anderson and Deakin. We invite you to watch this commercial that they put together, which tells a little bit about their strategy in pursuing the corn case, and also a little bit about their history in GMO market closure litigation from the 2010 GMO rice cases. So please enjoy this commercial from Phipps Anderson and Deakin.
My name is Martin Phipps, and I am from the great big town of Breckenridge, Texas. I grew up in a town I like to tell people had 3 stoplights. Those values you bring from a small town, being honest, telling the truth, and standing up and believing in something, is something that we do here at our firm.
I'm Barry Deacon. I'm originally from Arkansas, grew up in a family law firm. Farming's been a big part of my professional life in representing farmers and agricultural related entities my entire practice.
You may ask why hire Phipps Anderson and Deakin. The best answer I give you is because we are so proud to represent farmers that it's the most important thing when you walk into our building and see what we do.
Part of my background was being involved in representing a co-op of rice farmers against bare crop science in the rice litigation that began in 2006. With my background in the rice litigation, that's important because that was genetically modified rice that was being experimentally tested that contaminated the U.S. rice crops. That litigation is very, very similar to the Syngenta corn litigation where an unapproved trait was marketed to China.
What you're going to find out in this case is when Syngenta released Viptera to sell to you, they hadn't even applied to China for approval. Because of that, they took a risk, and that risk ended with you losing the China market. When you're choosing a lawyer to represent you in the Syngenta litigation, every lawyer is going to tell you that they're the best. We don't have to say anything to you. We just want you to look at our record. We are the lawyers who tried and won the Rice case. We're the lawyers that developed the damage models. We're the lawyers that got the punitive damage verdicts. The Rice case settled for $750 million. I'm very proud to tell you that my farmers, the people that I've represented, got $50 million more than everybody else. We get asked every day, is this going to be a class action? And I want to make the answer real clear. We're not class action lawyers. We represent individual farmers against Syngenta and other big companies. And why do we do that? Because class actions don't help the clients. They only help the lawyers. Each one of you farm differently. Each one of your damages are different. So what we believe is we're going to represent you individually and not like some class action lawyer.
We are certainly not against the technology that Syngenta has come up with in producing their seed. We're actually for that technology because it's good for the American farmer. What we have a fault with is what Syngenta has done in marketing its corn. It's done it in an irresponsible way, and that has affected all of us.
I don't know about you, but we need more places to sell our corn, not less. And so all we're asking Syngenta to do is to stand up and do the right thing. The same thing you do every day when anybody comes to you with an issue. You may ask what makes us different at Phipps Anderson Deacon. The answer is simple, is we care. I've been on a combine and I know how hard it is to farm. And because I'm gonna make sure when I get done with this case and I come and sit in your living room, that you're proud that I'm your lawyer.
We are handling these cases on a contingency fee basis, which means we will not get paid unless we successfully try or settle the lawsuit, and we will pay all the costs of litigation. We believe in this case against Syngenta and are putting our money where our mouth is. So thank you for joining us. Please view the webinar on Report Day this Wednesday to hear the summary of the March USDA report.